The storm wasn't just outside, it was inside Jasmine Crockett too. It was a cold Thursday morning when Jasmine first realized that something was about to shift. She stood in front of her small-town radio station's studio mic, staring through the soundproof glass, waiting for the red live sign to flicker on. For 5 years, she had hosted Voices Unheard, a public interest broadcast dedicated to giving ordinary people a platform to speak truth to power. But today, the guest wasn't ordinary. Kash Patel, a man known more for chaos than clarity, had agreed to appear, not to argue, not to debate, but to reveal something that would change everything. Jasmine didn't trust him. Not entirely. But curiosity, well, it had always been the fuel behind her voice. As the countdown started, 3, 2, 1, the light went red. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice steady, though her heart drummed like thunder. "Today's episode is unexpected. We've got Kash Patel in the studio, and according to him, there's something he needs to get off his chest. Something urgent. So, Mr. Patel, the floor is yours." What followed wasn't a scandal. It wasn't politics. It was a confession. Kash didn't name names or point fingers. Instead, he told a story about a file. A file that came across his desk during a brief moment in government work, a file containing letters, applications, and photographs from hundreds of children who had been displaced by a poorly executed federal housing policy. One letter in particular haunted him. A 7-year-old girl named Ava had written, in shaky crayon, that her mommy didn't have medicine anymore because they had to choose between insulin and rent. They chose rent. Ava died 4 months later, quietly, in a shelter bathroom. Jasmine froze. "You knew?" she whispered. Kash nodded, his voice thick with guilt. "I didn't know how to say it. How to carry it. So I buried it." Jasmine snapped. Not with anger, but with anguish. Her chair screeched as she stood, her eyes blazing, and for the first time in her career, she cut the broadcast mid-segment. The red light went dark. Outside the glass, silence fell. "Why now?" she asked him, voice breaking. "Because someone had to see me, really see me, and not just what I pretend to be." That was the beginning. In the days that followed, the audio clip went viral, what little was aired before she cut the feed. People speculated wildly about what was said. Some accused Jasmine of covering something up. Others praised her for standing firm. But behind the headlines, something deeper was happening. Jasmine couldn't sleep. She remembered Ava. Not the real Ava, she had never met her, but all the Avas of the world. The children left unseen. She dug through her files, contacted shelters, nonprofits, anyone who might remember the girl behind the crayon letter. And then, she found Ava's mother. Her name was Renee Johnson. She was living in a halfway house in Fort Worth, Texas, working odd jobs, trying to stay sober. When Jasmine called, there was silence on the line, then a simple sentence. "I thought everyone forgot us." Jasmine flew out the next morning. They met in a quiet corner of a community center, surrounded by painted murals and kids with second-hand shoes. Renee didn't cry. She just stared at Jasmine with eyes that had seen too much grief and too little justice. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Nothing," Jasmine said. "But I want to help tell your story. Not for views. For healing." Renee nodded. The project began as a podcast episode, a tribute to Ava. But it grew. Hundreds of letters poured in. Parents, teachers, former caseworkers, even old neighbors. One woman from Chicago said she'd known Ava at a shelter and still had a drawing Ava had given her, a stick figure holding a sun. The drawing became the logo for a new foundation, Ava's Light. Jasmine and Renee co-founded it, with Kash quietly donating the seed money. At first, he didn't want his name attached. "Let it be about her," he said. But Renee insisted. "You help me see I'm not invisible," she told him. That matters. The night of the foundation's first fundraiser, Jasmine stood behind a podium in a packed town hall. The room was full of warmth, donors, advocates, everyday people who had been moved by a story that never should have been forgotten. But Jasmine didn't just talk about Ava. She talked about a woman who gave up her career to run a shelter out of her garage. About a boy named Deshaun who donated his birthday money so no kid would ever feel left out. She talked about the power of small kindnesses that echo far beyond their moment. Halfway through her speech, Jasmine paused. She looked out at the crowd and said, "I went nuts on air that day, not because I was angry at Kash, but because for the first time, the truth had weight. And I realized, if we all carried a piece of it together, maybe no one would get crushed." Tears filled her eyes. And then someone in the audience stood. Renee. And she walked forward, holding a single white candle. "This," she said, lighting it, "is for Ava. And for all the children whose light didn't get to shine long enough." One by one, others followed. Within minutes, the entire room flickered with candlelight. The fundraiser became more than an event, it became a turning point. In the weeks that followed, the momentum behind Ava's light spread like wildfire. Journalists began highlighting not just the tragedy behind Ava's story, but the strength and resilience of her mother, the courage of Kash Patel's public admission, and Jasmine's unwavering dedication to truth. But it wasn't about fame anymore. Something deeper had awakened in Jasmine. Every letter she read, every story she heard from families on the edge, stirred something in her that even her radio career hadn't touched. A raw, urgent purpose. She quit the show. People were stunned. Voices Unheard had become a trusted institution. But Jasmine knew in her bones that amplifying stories was no longer enough. She wanted to rewrite them. She poured herself into Ava's light full-time, traveling city to city, partnering with grassroots organizations to create community relief hubs. But the work wasn't easy. During a visit to Detroit, Jasmine was mugged on her way to a shelter. They took her bag, her ID, even her shoes. She ended up in a local clinic with a split lip and a sprained wrist. When Renee called, worried, Jasmine just said, "This is what it takes sometimes. To be real. To understand." That night, a woman in the shelter named Gloria handed Jasmine a pair of worn sneakers and said, "I lost a daughter, too. In the fire. But we rise. One pair of shoes at a time." It was moments like that, intimate, small, holy, that stitched the story into something unforgettable. Meanwhile, Kash Patel was facing his own storm. His confession had triggered government scrutiny. Investigations were reopened. He was subpoenaed by multiple oversight committees. His reputation, already controversial, began to crumble under the weight of decades-old decisions. But something in him had changed. Instead of lawyering up and hiding, he showed up. He testified honestly, even when it cost him. In one hearing, when asked why he exposed his own complicity, he said, "Because a little girl died, and I couldn't pretend her life was just paperwork. Because Jasmine Crockett looked me in the eye and didn't see a villain or a victim, just a man who had to choose who he wanted to become." The room went silent. And across the country, people began re-evaluating not just Kash, but themselves. Ava's light grew. Not like a wildfire, but like a sunrise, steady, golden, impossible to ignore. It launched mobile clinics in underserved areas, provided mental health counseling for homeless children, and built healing corners, warm, welcoming spaces in shelters where kids could read, draw, and just be kids. Every healing corner had a mural of Ava's stick-figure son. One morning in Tulsa, Jasmine met a boy named Mateo who had been silent for weeks. He wandered into a healing corner, picked up a crayon, and whispered, "Do you think the sun still remembers me?" Jasmine knelt down and smiled. "I think it never forgot." But the true turning point came during a national summit on child poverty. Jasmine had been invited to speak alongside renowned policymakers and nonprofit leaders. She wore the same blazer she'd worn the day of the original broadcast, the one that had changed everything. As she stood before the audience, she carried no notes, no speech. Only a letter. It was Ava's. The original crayon-scrawled message, "My mommy is sad but I told her the sun will come back. I will be brave." Jasmine held it up. This isn't just a child's hope. It's a roadmap. It's how we rebuild, by believing the sun will come back, and by being brave enough to make it happen. When she finished, there was no applause. Only tears. And then, thunderous clapping that shook the room. After the summit, Jasmine stepped outside, overwhelmed. She sat on a bench, exhaling, when a young woman approached. "I'm Lily," she said. "I was Ava's social worker." Jasmine's heart stopped. Lily sat beside her, trembling. "I tried everything, Jasmine. I really did. But I had 142 cases. I used to cry in my car between home visits. I wrote her name on a sticky note next to my steering wheel. She called me Sunshine Lady." Jasmine took her hand. "You carried her, even after." They wept together. Not with shame, but with release. With grace. A year passed. Ava's light had helped over 10,000 children find safe housing. More than 30 healing corners had opened across the U.S. Congress had just passed the AVA Act, bipartisan legislation that provided emergency support to families facing housing insecurity. And Jasmine, well, she still went city to city. Still carried Ava's letter in her jacket pocket. Still made time for every mother, every shelter volunteer, every crayon drawing. But something had shifted in her, too. One night, after a long day of travel, Jasmine sat on the floor of a tiny motel room and pulled out her phone. A voicemail blinked. She hit play. It was Kash. "I don't know if I'll ever be the man I should have been. But I want you to know, you made me believe I could become someone better. Not perfect. Just better. That has to count for something." Jasmine smiled, eyes wet. "It does," she whispered. 2 weeks later, Jasmine received an invitation to return to the radio studio where it all began. The new host wanted her to do a final, retrospective interview. At first, she hesitated. But Renee nudged her. "You started a fire," she said. "Let them see how you kept it burning." So she went. Same studio. Same chair. Same red light. But this time, when it flicked on, Jasmine didn't feel the weight of silence. She felt the hum of truth. And she said, "1 year ago, I cut this feed because the truth felt too big to carry. But I've learned something since then. The truth doesn't crush us when we carry it together. That's what Ava taught me. That's what this work is about. Seeing people. All of them. And loving them anyway." She paused. "And if a little girl can believe the sun will come back, maybe we can, too." The light faded. Epilogue. Years later, in a quiet neighborhood outside Dallas, there's a new community center named Ava's Light Haven. It's painted yellow and covered in kids' art. Jasmine runs workshops there. Renee teaches parenting classes. Kash visits sometimes, helping out behind the scenes. In the hallway, there's a plaque that reads, "In memory of those the world forgot. And in honor of those who remembered anyway." And above it, Ava's drawing of the sun. Still shining. Always. The end. Moral of the story. True change begins when we choose compassion over comfort, truth over silence, and community over ego. Even a single act of honesty or kindness, however small, can ignite a movement that brings light to those who've been left in the dark. And when we carry the weight of truth together, no one has to be crushed beneath it.